The Jurassic period was the greatest time in the story of dinosaurs. Leaps in evolution were made. They found new ways of dealing with the climate, the environment, and of course, other dinosaurs. And also, things like the first feathers appeared. And unlike most other periods in evolutionary history, the Jurassic period did not end in a terrible, horrible mass extinction leading to the deaths of billions upon billions of innocent creatures. And this meant that the next period, the Cretaceous, could take it to a whole new level. And this was the peak of terrestrial life on Earth. So let's dive into it. The climate during this time was warmer than it was today. However, it would get even warmer in the later Cretaceous. Because of this weather, the sea levels could now rise to very big heights, and many of the continent's areas, most of which were near the place they sit in today, were buried with a shallow layer of water. This gave way to new kinds of marine life. However, one marine animal that wasn't doing very well was the ichthyosaurs, which I talked about in my video on the Triassic and the Jurassic. However, the plesiosaurs were doing fantastically. Again, I talked about these guys in my Jurassic video. These guys are pretty much dominant predators, dominant presences in the ancient seas. But you're not here to hear about what happened in the ocean, mostly. You're here to hear about terrestrial life. Or, maybe you're not, in which case, I'm really sorry. On land, a major step in plant evolution was made. When I ask you to imagine the most beautiful scenes in nature, most people would think of a beach, a beautiful mountain range, waterfalls, something like that. But something that might come up is a grand field of flowers. The first flowering plants made their debut in the Cretaceous period. The very first angiosperms appeared about 125 million years ago, and it completely changed the competition for plants. These plants rely on other natural occurrences like water or rain, or little animals called pollinators, which today we mostly think of as bees, but they can be anything from birds to other insects to a lot of things. The point is, these flowers changed the game completely. The first true birds started to appear. The first feathered dinosaurs appeared in the Jurassic, but now they were fully realized birds, having lighter beaks instead of heavier snouts full of sharp razor teeth, similar to the incredible, beautiful ones we see today. But one key difference is who they shared the skies with, the pterosaurs. In the early Cretaceous, there were some pteranodontoids, which would later become the pteranodontids. It's a bit confusing, but what you need to know is that the ones in the early Cretaceous were a bit smaller and less developed than the ones in the late Cretaceous. The next kind were the tapijarids, which looked like the stuff of nightmares, but they were most likely omnivores or ate mostly fruit, which are two vastly different theories. And then there were the istiodactylids, which had a bit of a larger beak than the pteranodon-like things, and they were probably scavengers. Now on solid land, many predecessors of more famous dinosaurs were walking around, but they wouldn't reach their full might until this is it. It doesn't get any better than this in terms of scale on land. The very last part of the dinosaurs' existence may just be the most diverse and fascinating our planet has ever gotten. Let's start with the plants. Flowering plants started dominating and reshaping ecosystems for the better. Let's talk about the skies above. True pteranodons could now be seen soaring through the skies, catching fish near coastlines, but the real star of the show is the Quetzalcoatlus, the largest living thing to ever fly, being around the same height as a giraffe. Some experts have argued that it lived a fish-catching lifestyle like the pteranodon, others that it was simply a scavenger. And then there is the theory that it may have actually been a terrestrial hunter, probably preying on smaller dinosaurs and creatures. Sea levels were at some of the highest they've ever been in Earth's history, also having extremely warm climates. Lots of shallow seas covered what is now dry land, giving way to some of the most fascinating marine life the planet has ever witnessed, including the famous Mosasaurus. Mosasaurus ate anything from sharks to turtles to even birds. What's interesting about the Mosasaurus is they were essentially a type of lizard. Many Mosasaur skulls have been found with injuries which have been theorized to have been caused by others of its kind, which would make sense. There aren't a whole lot of other things other than another mosasaur that could damage a mosasaur. Alongside Mosasaurus ruled plesiosaurs, which I talked about in my last video, and sadly, ichthyosaurs were on the decline more than ever. Now, between the water and the land, giant crocodiles ruled, like Sarcosuchus and Dinosuchus. These guys probably had the power to take down massive dinosaurs, similarly to how modern-day Nile crocodiles can drag a 230 to 260 kilogram wildebeest into the water. But do you know who else ruled these fresh waters and coastal environments? The Spinosaurus is undoubtedly one of the greatest iconic dinosaurs of all time. So let's discuss this baby. The sail on its back could have had multiple different purposes. For one, and I think this is pretty likely, it was used for thermoregulation. Obviously, dealing with the massively warm climates that the Cretaceous brought, there had to have been some unique adaptations. One of them could have been a sail-like structure that could have been flushed with blood and been cooled. Or it could have been a lot simpler. Simply, it could have just been used for intimidation or mating purposes. They were most likely generalist predators, but they preferred to eat fish, most likely, making them essentially the grizzly bears of the dinosaur world. Having relatively weak bite forces compared to other theropods, they probably had to use their claws much more. Now let's talk about the many famous terrestrial dinosaurs of this era. My personal favorite is the Ankylosaurus. This thing was a walking tank. However, I have a full-length video just talking about the Ankylosaurus and Ankylosaurids, so check that out if you want. Another dinosaur with amazing defenses was the Triceratops, being about 8 to 9 meters long and weighing anywhere between 6 to 10 tons. The Triceratops was a force to be reckoned with. Despite popular belief in what we see in media, there isn't a whole lot of evidence to support that Triceratops traveled in large herds. While many of its relatives most certainly did, Triceratops specifically may have not, although I do think it's likely that they traveled in some sort of group. Or maybe it just wandered the world alone, feeding on grass, and fighting the most famous dinosaur of all time, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was probably the most formidable terrestrial predator of all time, with a bite force that could probably crush a block of uranium. But there is a lot more to say about this fascinating critter. They could lift at least 200 kilograms with their tiny little arms. But the purpose of these arms have to this day still not really been solved. I mean, it's so strange, these two little fingers on the side of its body. Maybe holding prey in place, maybe just slicing chunks out. They don't really know. They also had incredible senses, with their most unique one probably being the fact that they could sense low-frequency sounds. I mean, they gotta stop buffing this guy. They also had a fantastic sense of vision, smell, and just generally hearing. And that's not very common for many theropods to have a very good hearing ability. So this guy was just buffed to the absolute limit. But if that wasn't enough, there have been some theories that suggest that Tyrannosaurus Rex may have actually hunted in packs, which would have, it would have multiplied their effectiveness and overall dangerousness. And if this all wasn't enough, it may have also had an infectious bite, similar to what we thought Komodo dragons had, before it turned out that they were actually venomous. However, not even this apex predator of this apex predators could escape the doom of the greatest age in the history of life. In an instant, with the impact of an asteroid about 12 kilometers in length, energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs was released in seconds. Everything near the explosion vaporized. The impact created shockwaves, creating massive tsunamis, destroying the coastlines around it. Ash and dust rose into the sky like dark clouds, reaching probably the furthest places on the planet, causing wildfires everywhere. After the effects of the initial impact slowed, the dust clouds covered the entire planet, blocking out the sun and sending the Earth into a long winter. Many plants and animals that had miraculously survived the initial effects now had to survive the impossible domino effect of no sunlight. No sunlight means no photosynthesis. No photosynthesis means no plants. No plants means no plant eaters. No plant eaters means no meat eaters. If this wasn't bad enough, acidic rain falling from the sky poisoned the water and soil. It was hell on earth, and the large, majestic rulers of the world just couldn't keep up. It was the humble little critters living in the shadows that could survive something like this. And of course, among these were the mammals, who in the next few million years would lead to dominate the planet, and they still dominate the world to this day. One of them being called humans, that are now sort of causing the new extinction event, but I guess that's just how the world works. But we'll start the era of mammals next time, because as for right now, this was the end for the dinosaurs. Now, if you like that video, drop a like and subscribe. No, I'm just kidding. You only need to do that if you want to. Have a good day. Goodbye.